Hello everybody, Dragon Age DLC, multiplayer Dragon Age DLC landed, and it is completely free, so we're going to take a look at it. This is all pre-recorded footage, obviously, and I'm going to go over all the new stuff that was added, including this new level that you see. There's been new loot, 3 new characters added, there is a dragon fight, which is really rad, and some other stuff. So we're going to talk about all of that, but I'm going to preemptively say, before we get into that the same problem that was with Dragon Age multiplayer before is still there, which is that weird, if you're not hosting the game, you'll get like a slight amount of lag, especially if the person that is hosting has a bad internet connection. If they are, you know, a good host, they do have a good internet connection, you still get a little bit of lag, as you'll see. So just pointing that out, if you do plan and, you know, coming back to Dragon Age multiplayer, if you own the game, or even if you don't own the game and you pick it up, you can download this DLC for free. I just want to stress that it is completely free, and it is amazing that they've done that, because I think they could have charged money for it. It's that good. So here's the thing. They've added so much new little tiny stuff that it's mind-boggling. Like, it's just like all these things put together to make one really cool piece of DLC, which is this new dragon fight stuff. They've added this new level, which you're seeing. This is the Ferelden Castle. It comes in 3 variations, as in it changes based on whatever dragon is chosen. You can choose a random dragon. So there's like this frost one that you see here. There's Inferno, which is like a fire theme. And then there's the storm theme, where it's rainy and stuff throughout the castle. The layout remains the same throughout the castle. And I'm okay with that, because it's pretty big open areas. It does give you a lot of options, to, you know, of where you're going and how you execute certain places, especially with like the secret areas. Like, when do you get those? Do you get them as soon as you get into an area, or do you get them after you've killed all the enemies, or do you get them in between? Like, there's all this little stuff that is within these levels that it makes it feel like, you know, even though it's one level and the layout doesn't change, the look of it and the way that the enemies come at you, you know, based on what enemy type it is, it feels different each time you go in, which is really good. Also, it's just really big and beautiful, and they've done a good job of that. So you have this new level, and then you have the 3 new classes. You're seeing one of them. She may look familiar. It is Isabela. So in case you thought your eyes were deceiving you, no, it actually is Isabela. And she is the duelist, which is the new class. There's the virtuoso, which is he's basically a bard, let's be honest. He's got a lute and he plays music. And then there's the Avar, which, if you remember the big Avar people from the main story campaign, you know, the guy that attacked you with the goat, basically them, right? They're the other class, and it's a big 2-handed warrior with kind of magic-y stuff, which is really good. It's like the elementalist mixed with the reaver. I've liked what I've gotten from it thus far, but Isabela is certainly my favorite, and we'll talk about how all these new classes work as we go. But I did want to quickly point out that the way these levels work, as you're gonna see, is it's wave-based combat. So you go into a new area like you do in the previous levels. You know, you open up the gate, you go into a new area, but then just waves of enemies will come, and it's kind of like a constant stream of enemies, and you just kill them until they stop coming, and then you've beat that area, and then you move on. Unlike the other ones where there's like a certain amount of enemies, you kill those enemies and then it's done. This level has certainly a lot more of them. And then coming up here soon, you will see this. It's a giant gong, and it's always in the same spot in the level. And what happens is, if you have crafted an item beforehand called the Dragon's Call, you craft it while you're in the lobby still, before you're even in the game, you can utilize that, you can use it to summon the dragon. And what that does is, at the end of this level, instead of summoning, you know, like the demon commander, for example, if you're fighting demons, like instead of fighting the last boss of whatever enemy type you're fighting, instead, it will summon the dragon that's flying around. And the dragon will constantly berate you throughout the entire level from start to finish. He will just be, you know, shooting whatever element, you know, at you. So if he's the fire dragon, he'll be shooting fire. If he's the frost one, you'll see frost stuff. And it's cool because it adds a unique challenge. There's a lot of indoor areas where you're able to avoid the dragon, which is really cool because you kind of move from area to area. And that's really important because of the bard class. In particular, you really want to stay kind of close to them, and I'll tell you why when we get to that. But let's talk about Isabela first, because she's the one that I have the most experience with of the new classes. She has arguably one of the coolest mechanics, at least for me, of the three, which is that my number 1 ability, and some other abilities, like my number 4 does it, if there's other abilities that cast it on them, it puts a debuff on the target. And that debuff is that little skull and bones thing that you can see above the enemy's heads. Now, my number 2 ability, and again, you can spec into different abilities that will do it, it will consume that debuff, and it will give me a buff. And on the bottom of my screen, you could see 4 little coins. Now, if you're, you know, not spec'd into it, you'll only have 3 of them, but I've put a point into it to have a 4th coin. And what that does is if I get hit with an attack, it completely mitigates that attack. I do not get hit with any damage whatsoever. So if, you know, say one of these little hyenas jumped at me and did damage to me, I would not take damage for one of those attacks. And it would happen 4 times. I could absorb 4 attacks in a row without taking any damage at all. And in that amount of time, I could have put another debuff on the target, or multiple debuffs on targets, and then used my number 2 ability and filled that all the way back up. So Isabela is really good at living as a duelist, and it's really fun because it fulfills that fantasy that I've had in Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 of playing the duelist class, or, you know, whatever's like that, and being a rogue tank, and it's got this kind of cool idea, and I really like that they've added it into the multiplayer, and she makes one heck of a tank sometimes if you know how to play it right. And then my number 3 ability is this cool, you know, if and or weapon, right? So if a enemy is away from me, I can use my number 3, and it will grab onto them, and then I will launch myself to them and get in their face, which is really cool. It puts me in melee range. It also stuns them for a brief second. Now, if I'm up close to them, or if I'm up close to them, if you want to go in technical terms, I can use it, and it'll fly me backwards away from them, so I can get out of, you know, range of their melee attacks or whatever, which is really cool. It's nice for like the demon commander when he does his little charge up thing and he's doing his AoE thing. You can use your number 3 ability and get completely out of it, kind of the same way like a bow rogue can use the leaping shot to get out of it, right? You think of it a little bit like that in that sense of the mechanic. And then finally, I've spec'd into it, so if the target has the debuff, it reduces the cooldown. The cooldown is normally 12 seconds, but if it has that debuff on it that I can put on, it will reduce that cooldown by 6 seconds. So it'll only be on cooldown for 6 seconds. So you can really be very mobile with Isabela, and you'll see that as I'm playing here. I'm jumping in and out, and I'm using my number 1 ability very often to, you know, debuff as many targets as possible. That I'm running in with the number 2, and that I'm using my number 4 to really like knock them back. And I'm not saying this is the best spec to run with Isabela, the one that I'm doing right now, but this is the one that I've come up with that is really fun, and I really, really like using her because of that. So there's some other things that you could do. She obviously uses daggers as her main weapon, even though she has this like crossbow that she pulls out for some of her ranged attacks, which is really cool. So, you know, basically your typical rogue from that point forward. And I kind of wish that they added her as a class, or as a specialization that you could pick up in the single player, because I would love to play this instead of the assassin, even though I do like my assassin quite a bit. Now, the bard has something really unique. He starts with 4 abilities. Most classes don't, but you can never change his 4 abilities. So what they are is the first 3 are 3 separate notes. Think fire, ice, and the electricity, right? So you have the 3 elements, but they're notes that he plays. And then his 4th ability is like cast this spell. So the best way I can describe it is like Magicka. If you've ever played Magicka, you combine elements together, and then you use those combined elements to cast spells. And throughout the game, you learn more and more spells as you go, and it's really cool. But And this in particular, instead of unlocking abilities as you go, you unlock new songs that you can play. So it's just basically combinations of, elements like, frost, 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 or frost, fire, frost, or fire, fire, frost, or storm, storm, fire, stuff like that. And you use them, and he will cast it, and it will put like a AoE around him, basically. And he does have two different trees. So like one is a support tree and one is a DPS tree. And they, both give him two very separate things that he's able to do. So, like he can, put barriers on people. And then he could, cast like a movement speed thing. And all this stuff, as you learn it, I think you can learn all of the songs if you put all your points into them. But then you have to memorize like all of these note combinations that you put in, and I don't think it matters the order. Like if it's frost, fire, frost, you can do fire, frost, frost, and it would still do the exact same one. I'm pretty sure that's also how it works from my experience with it. But it's really cool, and there's a certain range on all this stuff. So as you'll see where we're going through this, we're trying to stay by him as much as we can. And this is only on threatening, like perilous is much more difficult with these levels, a lot more difficult with these levels. But for the most part, you want to stay around your bard if you have one, because it's just so powerful. He can do so many cool little things like buffs and whatnot. And I really enjoy having the class on my team, in fact. And I can't say that about all the classes. There's a couple of them where like, he's going to play that guy. Okay, well, we're really going to have to carry him. But for the bard in particular, you feel like he is very strong. So that's his little mechanic, which is really cool. He has mana, and he can auto-attack as well. So it's kind of, your basic mage. He uses staves and all that. And then finally, the Avar has got a lot of your typical, two-handed warrior abilities. He can leap into combat, which is really cool. But then he's got all this elemental stuff that I've noticed he can do, and I'm the least experienced with the Avar, I think. So I would say that I'm not going to go too in-depth here, because I really do want to talk about this dragon fight, but in particular, the Avar can, do different elements, like the frost attacks, like he can freeze people, and then it's really cool how his elements interact with each other, and I would suggest, getting that. And the last thing that we need to talk about with these three classes is that when you get into multiplayer for the first time with this DLC, under the store, under the free chests, there will be a Dragonslayer chest, and it will contain one of the three classes. So that is, you'll start with one of the three of them just by downloading the DLC, which is really cool. It's random, and the least that I've seen of is the Avar. I think it's the most rare. I've seen a lot of Isabela, and I've seen quite a few bards. So I think Isabela's the most common one, but definitely the most fun for me because I'm a rogue player. Now this dragon fight, let's talk about it, because we've summoned it instead of doing the final boss of our, monster type. So the dragon, I think, has 3 phases. Most people would argue it's just 2. But, as a raider, I would say it's 3. So the first one is when he's on the ground and he's fighting. The dragon will cast its typical dragon abilities, frost, fire, lightning, whatever it is. And then it will armor itself up and all that fun stuff. Your basic dragon stuff that you see in the single player. But then, at certain life thresholds, he'll fly up into the air, and there's 2 trebuchets, because he'll land on one of the 2 towers, and you go to one of the trebuchets, and you charge it up, and you fling it at him. And if you preload the trebuchet, you can get it just before it shoots. Because if you just keep, using it, even though the dragon isn't up on one of the 2 towers, it will just automatically shoot. But you can pre-charge it a bit, which is a good way, like on Perilous, of getting ready for him. And then once you launch it and it hits him while he's on the tower, you have a limited amount of time to do that. It will knock him into the next phase of the fight again. So say he's up on the tower. I consider this phase 2 of where he's at now. And then you throw the rock at him with the trebuchet, and then it pushes him into the next fight, or the next phase, which I consider phase 3, which is when he's flying around and dragonlings are coming out. Dragonlings come out while he's on the tower as well, so that will be spawning. But there is this weird in-between phase of when he's flying around bombarding you and you're dealing with dragonlings. So I would consider that phase 3. So phase 1 is he's on the ground, you're fighting him. Phase 2 is he's up in the air and then lands on a tower. You have to trebuchet him. And then phase 3 is that weird, awkward phase in between where dragonlings are still spawning and you're still fighting him. And then it just repeats, just over and over and over. Now, some might say that, oh, that's kind of basic, but you got to give BioWare credit. This is an incredibly complex thing that they've added to the game, a dragon fight, multiplayer, you know, no doubt. And they've done it really well. I feel like, yeah, I'm fighting a dragon. It's not as difficult as fighting a dragon as, you know, like in single player on Nightmare, but it is still really, really fun, and I've really enjoyed the fights that they've added with them. So I would highly suggest going and getting this free DLC if you haven't already. I mean, it's free. You should go do it and play some multiplayer because it's freaking fun. And if you don't own the game already, don't worry. You can get this DLC for free, you know, at any given time in the future. So you could just buy the game and then, you know, get your DLC for free, which is really cool. But once you fight the dragon, once you've killed him, he drops some good loot, and he has the potential to drop one of the 3 classes as well. I would suggest playing it. I've been having fun with it. And with all of that being said, we shall see you guys next time.